I want to introduce Dr. Karen Shackleford, who is the head of the Media Psychology Research Lab. And today we're going to hear a fascinating presentation about what people watched and rewatched during the pandemic. So welcome, and Karen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Well, so my goal today was to let potential students kind of get a feel for what the experience of what it's like to be a grad student working in the Media Psych Laboratory. So as you can imagine, like many things during the pandemic, people may be used to doing research face-to-face, but we've been doing it using distance helpers like Zoom for a long time. And, you know, there are pros and cons just as there are with working, you know, from a distance. And that's true too for entering a program. So I think that whenever I talk to students who are interested in potentially coming to the program, you have to know that it's a good fit for you, that you're going to thrive in an environment where you can connect like this or in other ways with technology, and then also face-to-face as well. So all of those things you want to bear in mind. One of my students is just calling me right now. I'll talk to you about your dissertation later. Seriously. So that's what it's like. That's you know, people texting you. I was telling Brian earlier today, either you might be trying to avoid me or stalk me. It all depends on your you know, orientation there. But so just as we do courses of other sorts in various ways, this is how we're doing the lab here. And I have been at Fielding since 2009, and you know, have learned over time how to interact and how to try to thrive in the environment. And now I'm so used to it. I can't imagine doing it the way I used to do it. But so I wanted to tell you about the lab and introduce the members of the research lab who are here today, and then just kind of give you an overview. And again, this is, I'm thinking from the perspective of you as potential students, understanding what it might be like. So I'm sort of oriented the talk towards that rather than about the research itself. But the research itself is so interesting that once we start talking about it, we'll tell you some things that we're up to. So first, let me go ahead and introduce the members of the lab and have you just say briefly why it was as a graduate student you wanted to get involved with research. And this is research towards the goal of presenting it professionally and hopefully publishing it. So let's start. I'm just going to go through my screen from left to right here. So Josh Cohen. So I'm going to say your names and then I'll introduce you individually. Josh Cohen, Mindy Weathersbee, Debbie Scearce-Miles. Did I say that right?
Yep, Scearce. That's good.
Scearce, and Brian Jayakumar. And so if you could, let's start with you, Josh. Just introduce yourself and if you could tell those on the call today what made you want to be part of the research lab.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Josh, and I got involved in the research lab a couple of reasons. First of all, I know research fits right into what I want to be doing in the future. I'm a visiting instructor now at a college, and I want to. This is my first research study of this kind, and I want to continue to develop my skills as a researcher. And so it was a perfect opportunity to do so, to be able to kind of look ahead towards the future. Especially this particular study about rewatching has a lot of elements that I want to include in my dissertation because I love narrative, studying narrative and the impact of narrative. And narrative is profoundly important in every aspect of our lives. And so anyway, it really worked out well that this study came about right as I was getting back into school, because it fit into my professional pursuits, and also it aligned perfectly with my dissertation and my passion for narrative and parasocial interaction and a lot of other different psychological constructs that we're looking at.
So I'll hop in here before I call on Mindy, Debbie, and Brian to go ahead and insert here the kind of the nature of the project in a bit more detail, and give you some other aspects that come along with that. So Josh is my advisee, just also will give you some feel for the program. And so we were talking, getting to know each other, and we have very aligned research interests. I'm very interested in narrative psychology in general, in our connection with characters and personalities such as actors and athletes. And also, the psychological process of connecting, whether that be identifying with, whether it be having a parasocial relationship, or whether it's sort of, I think of it like an avatar, sort of you take on the goals of the character, which is part of Jonathan Cohen, Jonathan Cohen's definition of identification, that you take on the goals of the character as if they were your own. So it's a very intimate connection. So I'm interested in that psychologically and what it does for the viewer or the reader, specifically in terms of social psych, since I'm a social psychologist. How is it that we come to understand relationships, choices, feelings, everything in the context of social relations and interactions from exposure to stories, which of course we've been doing forever. And how does that relate to our ability to sort of empathize with and connect to a character and or the persona that's related to that character. So Josh and I were talking, and he was telling me that he's interested in rewatching. And he told me a fun fact that I did not know, which is that the most rewatched, is it the most streamed and rewatched show is The Office?
It was the most streamed, yeah.
Most streamed,
both for either old or new content.
Which is amazing to me. The American Office, I watched the whole British Office, and I'm kind of partial to that one. But anyway, it's the same thing. I love Steve Carell. Anyway, so I was like, wow. So what is the psychology of rewatching? So when we say rewatching, and this is the basis of our whole research study, we're saying exactly what it sounds like. Are you rewatching? So watching content that you have watched before. So when you watch The Office, you may be watching it for the first time, even if it's 5 years after the show came out. We may have all experienced that, where a show has come out and everyone has seen it, and then we discover it later and we're like, what? The West Wing? I did that with The West Wing. Like, oh. But so for me, that's the entry point. So Josh and I have aligned research interests. Our conversation was very much sparking me, and I wanted to work with him. And also, I thought it was a great opportunity to take an idea that he had and do it. So we started there, and I invited these folks into the lab based on their skills and interests in the area, and also goals. So I'm asking them to present their goals here. Some people aren't seeking long-term to do research. Some people want to be an academic researcher in some way. And so all of those things are important when you first come into the program. Each of us gets advisees. And so it's important for the faculty and the student to kind of know what the person's reason for being here is, what their future goals are. And so you can kind of help them align those goals with what choices they make. So for people who want to be an academic or want to publish research for any other reason, and we are training researchers, it's really important to get a research experience. When I was in grad school, it was a Research One institution, and we all were painfully aware that we needed to try to publish something, even to get an academic job that was not a research job, a teaching job, which is what I went into initially, working at a teaching university. So it's really important. It's a currency that you have. If you have a publication on your vita, it's a currency for you. In other words, it might be a criteria for you to be hired in some jobs. Presentations are valuable as well. In addition to being valuable for all of the experience you get, they're valuable for you in your career. So when you publish a journal article, if you're like me, your mom will ask you if they pay you for that. You'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, no. But no, and yet yes, because I couldn't have my job, which does pay me. If I had never published anything, Fielding wouldn't have hired me. I feel very sure. In fact, they specifically hired me to do research in addition to the other things. So that's a little bit of background of the study, and we can tell you more about the process of how we then took that area and built it out into a study, and then the steps that we're taking, including getting everything together, IRB approval, collecting the data, and now we're analyzing the data. And also I'll mention that Melanie Green, my lovely colleague from SUNY Buffalo, who's the author of the transportation theory, she is a collaborator on this project. So we meet, so that's part of the format too. We meet weekly and we talk about the progress that we've made, what we need to do next, and that's how we accomplish that. At Fielding, it can be lots of different ways. Some things, just like in other aspects of work, some things work better via email, some things you need to actually meet about and have exchanges. Some things are one-on-one, some things are in small groups, so it takes different forms. So I will move on to Mindy and have you please introduce yourself and mention what brought you to want to do research in the lab.
My name is Mindy Weathersbee. I'm a librarian and obviously a student. My interest in research goes right along with what Josh and Karen were talking about, and also with Melanie. I'm interested in rewatching and rereading and narrative transportation, especially as it pertains to experience taking. That's where I'm going to be heading, hopefully, with the dissertation and the research. But really, I took it as well just for the exposure. I'm not sure, everybody asks you, what are you going to do with media psychology once you graduate? And I don't know yet. And so just being exposed to as many different experiences as I can and trying to learn the writing process and the research process outside of just, taking it for a class. We're actually doing real stuff in the real world. So it's been exciting to really actually learn how to do something with my skills that I've learned.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, we have just been analyzing our data. So anyone who thinks data analysis is not exciting has never asked a question they really wanted to know what the answer was, and then, have real people tell them. So now I'll introduce Debbie.
Hello. I am really excited to be part of the team because I get to work with Karen, and she's very modest, but a lot of her work is what interested me. She did game studies, and I did some research on game studies. I did independent research on memory and in video games, false memories. Didn't get any significant results, but I did get it published. But I'm very interested in working with a team, like I say, Karen, and I get to work with Melanie, and I know Melanie's work from reading her things forever in all the research that I've done, academic research throughout getting my master's. And so this was really exciting for me to join. And like Karen said, it can be very exciting when we looked at the reliability, getting the reliability of these different scales that we developed through talking together. We sat down and we thought, okay, what do we want to find out? And we got these scales together, and it's very exciting to see the results. Also, I'm looking forward to doing my dissertation. This aligns with the dissertation. The narrative idea aspect is also very, very important, along with transportation and all the other things that we talk about that are psychological principles. So I love research.
Yeah, and the team is really great. Like I said, they were selected based on their skills. They all have very sharp skills and their goals and interest in these areas. So it's a nice alignment. And yeah, collaboration, that's generally how psychology research is done. And, all of us are we're smart and we're used to being the smart person around, and then we have ideas and we're opinionated about how we want to do something. But I learned from the very beginning when I was a grad student that that it's done with collaboration, and that's probably good for your character as well as for your actual profession, because you have to learn to listen to the group and figure out how to do this stuff together, and actually say, okay, I've tried to do for the students what my mentor Craig Anderson did for me, which is even though for sure he's one of the best methodologists you'll ever want to meet, but he wouldn't just say, well, I know what I'm doing, so we're doing that. He would just say, okay, here's what the issue is. Here's some different choices. Here's why you might do this or not do this. And it is really like that in practice. Once you have been in the habit of submitting things for publication and then getting feedback on them, you know that when you make that choice, you're going to have it critiqued by other people, and you're trying to make your paper strong. Now, you can't, there's no protection from everything, because different reviewers are just going to say different things, and you can't stop that from happening. But you can try to foresee what some of the issues might be. Just as a small example here, and jumping forward into some of the details, we were looking together at using collecting data together and paying for our participants. And when you pay for them, there's different things you can ask for. So you can ask for it to mirror the sample mirror the demographics of the US population, which is actually more expensive than what we did ask. What Melanie and I both thought was, we just need to have it be about 50-50 gender-wise. And the reason for that is we both have experience where if something happens to be where you get 80% females, let's say, then your reviewers are likely to say, well, does this generalize to males? What's the issue here? Why are these, and so lots of questions arise. And so that's the reason why. And plus, you're just trying to get a sample of people. And, I believe we've asked male, female, and then we have other choices under there too. So it's not only male and female, but we're wanting it to not be mostly women, which sometimes happens for various reasons in various settings. And that's can be particularly problematic if what you're looking at has been shown to be related to gender. So I studied media violence for a while. And so people would always say, okay, we need to know the genders, and then we also need to test those, put those in your models to make sure that different people are reacting similarly or not, as you might have a theory to predict. So like Debbie said, we had this initial idea about rewatching, and we had to talk through all the details. So we have just, I don't know what we're officially calling it. We're sort of coming out of a pandemic here. There's a pandemic period. And so we had to grapple with the idea of, if we're going to talk to people about rewatching in the recent past, that's going to be during the pandemic in some way. And we are specifically interested in finding out what people did during the pandemic, since we were all home more, since we were under quarantine and things like that. So each of these things has to be figured out. What are we going to ask them specifically in terms of when are we talking about? And through these conversations, we ended up saying we're going to talk to them about the first part of the pandemic, when we were under quarantine, because we were all home and we know that people were watching more, and we want to know what they're watching. And the premise of the study also is, what would you watch during the pandemic? For what motivations? And so we talked together and developed items that had to do with, you could call it active and passive coping. Like, some people, you may know, watched the movie Pandemic specifically, or other sort of disaster related things. You could call that active coping. You want to watch somebody live through trauma or disaster or something similar to what you're going through. Again, because it's real life social psych, it's what is it like? What are the stressors like? How do people react it could be, infinite different little nuances one could pick up from that. And then, so there's a researcher named Michael Slater who has a concept called temporarily expanding the boundaries of the self. And the theory is that we read a story or watch a story because one of the motives is we want to temporarily expand the boundaries of the self, or short form is called boundary expansion, which we studied here. I talked to Michael Slater at an ICA conference a couple years ago, and he says he tries not to use the word escapism because people say, I watch TV to escape. And specifically what his theory says is it's difficult being an individual, and there's so much like self-related things that are hard for us. And so we enjoy, and again, he doesn't like to use the word escape, but we enjoy temporarily expanding the boundaries of ourselves. So I can go to another place, be another person, take another perspective. And this is actually a relief to me, because then I don't have to face everything as me. And that there's many aspects of that, but in this case, it would make sense. Okay, I'm going through all these different struggles, racial injustice, pandemic, all of the stuff we all know, political stuff. So what do I watch? When I'm at home, what do I watch during this? So that's where we went. Okay, and let's see, Brian, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, so I'm a little different than the other members. I came from a clinical perspective, and Karen was recommended to me by the clinical director saying that, her lab was really good, especially because I was interested in social psych. And I had to say it hasn't disappointed. From the first moment I came in, I was like the outsider. I came late. Everybody welcomed me. They made it very easy. And Karen may underestimate it, but she's super brilliant, and you learn a lot. And the benefit of having
that. Thank you, Brian.
the benefit of having a small lab is you really get the practical thing. Like if you're going into a larger lab, because I work with larger labs, you don't get the one-on-one attention, and you don't actually get to go through step by step and work through it. And that's a huge advantage. And I see like media psychology as like the future. Like I love social psychology, and social psychology has kind of become like media psychology is a new social psychology, because the media shapes everything. And this narrative study is particularly important because a lot of the interest that I have is about how people, like, you can almost use narratives like a surrogate for emotional experience and for growing and stuff. And if you take a social psychology course at Fielding, you will learn about the narrative stuff, and you will actually learn about Karen's theories about game theory because it's required reading for the class. So I think it's a great lab to be a part of and a great experience. And I just can't say enough wonderful things about my teammates and Karen.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and it is so true. I was saying earlier that it's true that when you feel like let's say you feel like you're good at research, and so you want to make decisions, and you learn to trust, it's not like I don't have a pathological, a desire to not trust other people, but it's just like, it's hard to let some stuff go. Sometimes it was for me. Now, not in the beginning, I was working under like master researcher. So, obviously he knows what I'm doing and I don't, but so the team also gets to see Melanie and I working together, and she is a sweetheart. And like Debbie said, she's, incredibly well known in the field. I went to a narrative conference with her. It was a small conference for just narrative researchers. And my husband, Lee, was there. He was sitting by Melanie in the audience, and everyone was citing green, green, green. And Lee leans over and says, does that get, easier? She's very shy, actually. And she's like, I have never gotten used to it. It's like surreal to see your name up there. And, personally for me, if you want to get on my good side, just say that you've read something I've written. It's not like about my looks or anything else. Just, if you just tell me you've read something, I'll be like, I love you forever. But, with people who are passionate about their work, but it is a weird thing. So Melanie and I then hopefully are modeling, and we're friends, and she used to work in North Carolina, the UNC. But you see then how professionals work with each other, that we don't just say, we're doing this my way or the highway, folks, it's, okay, let's talk about, again, why you might make some different choices, how there's not like one perfect choice, and somebody can always say something about it, but that's really not the point. It's not that you're sort of pandering towards your potential reviewer. It's that experience of getting feedback that you have over time just makes you aware that you are going to get that feedback. And then you have to ask yourself, is this some feedback that I'm going to listen to, or do I have a reason that I'm not going to listen to it? I could go on a whole thing about times where I've decided, no, this is theoretically important to me, and I have a belief about it, and it's based on literature and concepts. And so I'm going to do it, and I'm going to explain it, and I'm going to know some people won't like it. And that would have to mean so much to me that I would do it, that I would put that first rather than how easy this would be to get published. But those are all just things to keep in mind and things to work out. And, you know, when we have an issue like that in the lab, we'll just say, well, should we, like, let's say, is it important for us to get a sample that mirrors the US demographics? Let's talk about that. Like, why would it be? Would we have any specific predictions? You know, what will we do with that? What are the costs? Because literally there's a cost. It costs more money to pay participants if you get that type of a sample. Or we had the whole discussion of, where do you collect your data? Now, when you're at a face-to-face university, like the one that I worked at as a grad student, what we always did was, there was an intro psych subject pool, participant pool, and they had to, when I was an undergrad at the same university, I had to do 5 different studies and get a little stamps on my card for each study that I did, and got credit for that. And so that's sort of a normal model in US universities. But with media, that has also changed over time. People at Research One universities all the time now get samples via media through Qualtrics, which is our, we've been using that word, it's a survey software, and it also can be to recruit participants. We actually use Prime, what was it called? Prime Participants, or
it was called Prime Panels.
Prime Panels, thank you. Which I didn't even know existed, but Melanie had used that. There's just real briefly, there's a way of getting participants that I've used before. It's called Amazon's Mechanical Turk. And this is that, or MTurk for short. But apparently, and I know this from doing it, in the past, it can be very clunky in order to figure out how to post everything right and request the participants that you want. Like, do you want Americans? Do you want adults? Do you want this, that? Apparently, they've realized that, and for some extra money, they will do some more management for you so that you don't have to do everything. So just as one small example, it used to be that if you had a survey, say on Qualtrics, and you were recruiting from Mechanical Turk, you'd have to put a link in the end of the Mechanical Turk to send them back to your Qualtrics. They don't know this, but it's happening in the background, and you have to know to put the link in there. And now with the Prime panels, they take care of some of that for you. So you're not, like doing some of that labor on your own and not sure if it's working or what have you. So yeah, just different questions you answer, like, who are we going to recruit? How are we going to do it? Are we going to pay for it physically? Because with fan research, which I do, or other things like that, sometimes it just makes sense to not pay, especially if you don't have any money, and to recruit fans, because fans by definition are enthusiasts. That's what a fan is. So they're enthusiastic. So my former student, Cynthia Vinny, who's I've co-written multiple books with and everything else, she's wonderful. Her dissertation, she's a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and her dissertation recruited Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans. And she had to turn off her recruitment when she got over 1,000 participants because they were so enthusiastic and they wanted to do it. And she had created a Buffy montage just to remind them of famous moments, important moments in the series. And she got so much feedback from her participants about, why didn't they include that character or that character? I'm mad about that. So it was funny because they were crazily enthusiastic. They were so into whatever she was doing. And so that's, it's something to know about your participants. But then again, you'd have to go through and answer all those questions. well, what fans are we recruiting? From what sites? What are people, how would people think about this? And we've discussed doing another version of this current study, but with fans, because we didn't recruit specific fans for this one. Lab members on the call, I wanted to call you back in to share some of your experiences. Can you talk about anyone who wants to, the learning process and how you, some of the different tasks that we did? So things like the data analysis, how does that work when we're in different states? How do you get an opportunity to learn things about opportunities to publish and present? Anything that strikes you from the experience that you want to talk about the particular project would be great.
Well, Melanie gave us a sheet that I guess she got from one of her colleagues that took us step by step through what we needed to do to clean the data. And even before you get to analysis, how you clean it, if you have to reverse code the data. And it's a way you document what you're doing so that if someone wants to replicate your study down the way, you've got a documentation, and then you've got that document there that you can draw from when you do your methods and your results and your discussion section. And so that was very, very helpful. It's like a template that she gave us, and I was able to really use it for everything that I've done so far. Josh and I worked on it, and it's just been really, really helpful to hone in what we're doing and to understand that the steps that we need to document so that everybody knows we're on the same, so that everybody's on the same page. And that's been very helpful.
Yeah, and if you think about that, that's why what it means that experience is so helpful. So now Debbie has done this. So with her own dissertation data, she won't be, sometimes people, the risk is if you're remote, you're going to feel like you're alone and you're going to ask these questions. And of course you can come to your chair, you can come to your committee members, but if you've already done it before, each thing you've already done before, it'll feel more comfortable, like, oh, okay. So how do we decide if there are participants that should be removed? So outliers sometimes are removed from data. Melanie and I had a discussion about that with the students, and it also highlights that there's not one answer. It's not cut and dry like that, where every data set you must remove outliers based on this formula. And so we can talk about the whys in the background too, that we used a lot of standardized questionnaires that are, say, on 1 to 5 scales. And just by definition of the math, they're not going to have sort of extreme outliers, and they don't. So you may just decide from the beginning, okay, we don't need to try to remove outliers here. And Melanie shared her experience that she doesn't when she uses those. But we also talked about how, people have different rules for things. There's a thing called data transformation. Some people feel like for X and Y data analysis, you have to do X and Y transformation. And other people feel like all transformations are morally reprobate. So it's just like, so there's not one answer. So you have to know why you think that. What's your precedent or logic? You have a citation. Sometimes people have a citation that, if you're going to do this analysis, there's a risk of this problem. And so if you log transform your data, it will take away that problem. You just have to have an argument. And because there isn't one answer, know what the choices are and know why a person would take, make the different choices. Other lab members talking about the experience. How do you analyze data when you're not meeting someone in the same room? How do we write together on a project like this? Any experiences that struck you were surprises or that you found useful?
Well, something that we just discussed that I thought was helpful. Well, first of all, let me back up. Everything, I want to echo some of the things that Brian said. So like everything has been collaborative along the way. So even if someone or a couple of people are working on some part of the project, we're always talking about what we're doing with each other each week, so that others can weigh in. And I thought that was really great and very helpful. But as far as specifically the data analysis and the writing and everything, we're just kind of getting into that now and doing that now. And what I have found helpful, we have these great tools, screen shares and things like that, which sometimes is helpful and sometimes is not quite as helpful, in the sense that there are some parts of the project where doing things together and screen sharing, part of the data analysis, is good to see, because you have someone else, so Debbie and I are working on the data analysis together. You have someone else looking at the same things you are, in case you're missing something. And it's possible with all the data you have something like this, but also sometimes it's good to have it, you're doing it yourself, but then you're sharing with the team later, because there are sometimes, doing data analysis, there's some monotony to it. There's some things you just have to go through, especially talking about cleaning up the data and all that kind of stuff, so that you have both aspects of that, and being able to collaborate when you need to, but then also working by yourself on certain aspects of the analysis is helpful too. And then the writing aspect, like I said, we just discussed something I thought was just a brilliant idea, and something I'm going to keep in mind for future writing, is that something like this, that you want to write the methods and results first, and perhaps a student, I don't know, but would say, okay, well, I read an academic article from beginning to end, so I start with the abstract, or I start with the introduction, so that's how I should write it. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that is really a really awesome way to do it, because you are drilling down on really the most important aspects of the article. And if that's not right, if you don't have that presented just how it should be, everything else you say is really not, it's not going to make sense, or it's not going to jive with what you're trying to show, what you're trying to prove. And so you kind of work from the end, from the end back to the beginning, which I thought was helpful, which we're in the process of doing.
I'll say I said some things that are more challenging from a distance. I'll tell you one thing that is better from a distance, from my experience, because I taught face-to-face for 12 years, is doing data analysis with someone, whether it be working on their dissertation data together or doing a research project. You can actually, through this software, you can not only look at the same data analysis at the same time, same data, you can actually take control and do it on the other person's stuff. And I can't tell you how many times when I was doing it face to face, two people, let's say, would literally be sitting side by side at a computer, and I'd be like, okay, pull down and compute this. And then I have also been the learner in that situation. And I know you watch it and you're like, that all makes sense. And then you walk away and you think, I know how to do that, zero. Because for some reason it all looked right, but you have no record of it. Now you can't remember what to do. But here on Zoom, we can record the entire thing. Like I say, if Josh and I were analyzing a data set together on Zoom, I could take control of his screen. He could take control of my screen. We could do different analyses. I could say stuff and say, okay, it's under the menu, transform, compute, blah, blah, blah. And then there'd be a recording of it. So that is far superior. If you can go back to that recording, it's great. And if you can do it together where each person can control, because if a teacher and a student are sitting at a terminal and the teacher's moving, pressing the keys and everything, I found that is a disaster waiting to happen, really. So that is a beneficial thing. And Josh, you said something about, Melody and, oh, I know. So here's a thing that happened. So Qualtrics, again, is the part we're using is like SurveyMonkey or other software. It is data collection software. So there's a process where you learn how to input items of different sorts into Qualtrics. And when you, send your survey out for responses, you get the responses back. Well, I don't know why, but apparently Qualtrics sometimes messes up. And so let's say we have an item that says, I feel close to this character 1 to 5 scale. You should get numbers back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But on a few items, we got like 1, 7, 9, 13, 22 or something. And then our means were like 18. And we were all shrugging our shoulders. And Melanie said, oh yeah, I've had that happen before. I forgot to look for it. I still don't know why. I think it's like, every single time I analyze data, at some point in the whole thing, I get all agitated and I say, you have to be a genius to do all this stuff, because you have to remember so many different things. Hence what Debbie said about the notes, like, I did this on April 22nd, just, okay, I need a notebook where I can go back and look at that. But who needs, after all the difficulty of the math and everything, who needs to have a weird set of responses where, number 3 is actually 13. So we caught that together, we were able to share those experiences. And then we had talked about in the data analysis program, which is SPSS, you can do what's called recoding. So every time, if number 3, for some unknown reason, I suspect people who hate researchers, is marked as 13, then you tell your program to change all those 13s to 3, and then it gets all back in alignment. But I can just easily see the poor researcher who never realized that. And like 2 years later, they wake up in a cold sweat, like, oh my God, those data are wrong. There's just so many times that it can go wrong. And that's another advantage, really. I mean, even if you are smart and know how to do research, it is so much more valuable to be doing it with a team, because each team member has different knowledge sets and experience sets, and each team member has different strengths. So it's ideal, really, if you feel a little intimidated by data analysis, which we all do at some point or points in our life, but then you have someone who's strong on the team, you can always ask them questions or work with them, or they do more data analysis than you are doing, or whatever, you work it out for the particular situation and goals. But it's so, I highlighted what's hard about it. What's great about it, there's so many things that are great about it. And I'm never going to just decide, I'm going to do a study, just me, myself, and I mean, I'm going to write a paper, like just, I write editorials and I would write a book by myself, but I'm not going to just be like, I'm collect some data, not because of any other reason than I now, even though it was hard for me to initially go like, okay, most important decisions, I'm relinquishing control. I have now done that for, I've done that's done for many years, and it pays back benefits. It's just like life, right? It pays, but once you learn to get along with people, it is more than well worth it, right? So, so people have different perspectives. You so desperately need to have different perspectives on your research team, because you only have the one mind and you can't think about it from everyone else's perspective. And countless times people have said to me something that I wasn't thinking of at all, and then the light bulb just comes on. So just really, as a person and as a professional, countless reasons why the people on your team are so valuable. And yeah, it's also, and even though Craig, my mentor, was a super researcher and everything, he modeled for me what I hope I'm modeling here, which is that the professor is not the king or queen of the situation, and everyone else is their servants. We are all collaborators, and all I have that students on a team don't necessarily have, although they might, is a lot of research experience. That doesn't mean I wouldn't benefit from listening to everyone. We're equal collaborators, right? And we're just a research team, so we all can say, wait a minute, that's not I remember, for instance, Brian saying at a meeting early on, we're talking about rewatching. Well, what if the thing that you have watched is actually new to you, but what if it's in a franchise that you have watched a lot on? So that's not the same thing as like a single movie that's brand new and you're just watching it versus you watch all the Marvel movies and you've seen many Spider-Man movies. Now you're watching a different Spider-Man movie. Anna Maria, I see your hand up. Does anyone, first of all, anyone in the lab want to say anything else?
I just wanted to point out that one of the benefits of this structure is that I think with COVID, you're still allowed to operate, where a lot of labs had to close down because people didn't want to risk getting the virus and people are getting ill and stuff. This is I think a lot more universities are going to borrow this method because it works really well.
Yeah, and just like our student body, it allows us to have students from all over the country. It allows you to collaborate with people from all over the country. So I think I mentioned I started at Fielding in 2009. And given that I was working in this model, it became very normal for me to just collaborate with anyone, just doing it like this. And I was used to doing it like this. And yes, there are issues, but there are also benefits like the ones Brian mentioned. And one of the benefits is you can work with people all over. Melanie and I and Keith Oatley and Gail Stever are writing a article together, and we're all in completely different, locations, but we meet like this too and talk things out. Yeah, that's how we do it. And it's a lot like the rest of the program too, in that we use the same types of formats to meet, and we have, similar things going on. Let's see, question.
Really like the idea of collaboration because, somebody has a question.
I don't see the question. It's
Jacobs?
It's Kian.
Kian.
Yeah, hi, how are you? Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I had sent in an inquiry, and it might be more of a question for Ignacio, but I kind of didn't hear back. I did a master's program that involved a thesis, and so it had several courses related to preparing a thesis, qualitative research, quantitative research, some different angles, and then we wrote a thesis. So I went to Smith College in Northampton. They don't do this anymore because it broke people, like PhDs do. And this was master's level, so they don't do that anymore. They were the only social work school in the country doing it. But is there a possibility that some of those classes and credits would be counted towards a higher degree? Because when I looked at the curriculum, some of it felt repetitive. So is there a way to review that?
I'm happy to answer that. I'm Brian Cutler. I'm the Media Psychology Program Director. And we do have an articulation framework. Ignacio, if you could be kind enough to post in the chat the link to that. So the answer is yes. We do have a framework and a procedure for reviewing graduate courses taken at other institutions. We usually ask for the course syllabus. That's standard, and we compare them to the courses that were offered, and where we can, we transfer in course for those that you've taken.
Thank you.
There's a limit on the number of credits to transfer in, but that's certainly something we can have a look at. Yes.
Thank you.
And I see in the chat, Anne Marie is commenting that she's done some research and stats work at Fielding, which Brian mentioned. There's.
I loved it too. I don't know if you can hear me now. I
Yes.
changed. Yeah. Okay. For some reason, it wants some system to be the microphone and speaker select rather than my MacBook Pro, which is what I'm using. So anyway, it's solved for the moment. But yeah, I enjoyed studying statistics and research incredibly, doing that. And my kids actually are both heavily into that field, are researchers and writers and statistical science and public policy and environmental science. I'm fascinated just trying to catch up with that, but they're doing a lot of collaboration on the level and at their schools. And I just wondered how much, when you whiteboard, you can work, even something as simple as Google Drive, which is what I use with my students. And we have folders and deliverable folders. And I've had little small groups in breakout rooms where they had a whiteboard and one person was maybe controlling that, but they could shift control and someone else could add to it. And that's kind of good as long as you can save versions. That's kind of a tricky thing.
Yeah, so we explore different software over time. So the team has to have that conversation too. Sometimes, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And it varies. Sometimes there's a collaborator who has special needs or preferences. So for instance, I like to use Dropbox, and I just have a policy where if I'm writing a paper with multiple people, you change it, you put your initials on there, and if it's really fast and furious, you actually add the time of day as it's going by, as you're trying to like get it finished. That works for me. I just happen to like Dropbox, but I've had colleagues who say they can't use that, or and so we'll email it back and forth. But things have changed over time. At Fielding, we've used different software. I've tried different collaborative softwares like Boot Camp, or there's one called Monday. I've used even Discord for meetings, or what's the other one? Oh gosh, the one where you can like send people hearts and dollars. Anyway, just different ones. There was a student who presented his dissertation on either Discord or this gaming software, which I cannot.
Is it Twitch?
Yes, thank you, Twitch. They did it on Twitch. Yeah, I had another student who specifically did a lot of things in her career on Twitch and wanted to have her Twitch followers on there. And so they were live, chatting, asking questions, doing stuff in the background. We are moving more towards a Microsoft platform, and I don't think we have all the capabilities of Teams yet, and I don't fully understand everything you can do with Teams, but that's another option that may work. But softwares too, like we use a software I do called Deduce, which is inexpensive, and it's a content analysis software. And one of the reasons years ago a team and I chose that was because it's inexpensive and everyone can collaborate in on the same project. So we can all open it up just like we do on Qualtrics now and see the same survey or the same data set. There's a thing in Deduce where you calculate your inter-rater reliability. So both people can log in and do this on there. So yeah, it's often, you bring up a good point, because often you have to sort of at the beginning of a project figure out what software, what supports you're going to use, what's going to work for this project. Yep, and then I see some mentioning of Canva and Procreate, and yeah, it's hard to even keep up with all the stuff that rolls by, but sometimes there's one that's particularly good. At a past, we have national sessions, winter session and summer session, and we had the founder of Deduce come to Fielding winter session once, and he gave demonstrations and talked with the students about using Deduce. Another thing we do is, often with the software, I might actually do a lit search about who's using this software. What do people say about it? People do that with MTurk, I mentioned earlier. Are the data from MTurk good compared to other places you could get data? And people will have discussions about that, but it just adds the technology layer, to everything you're doing. And I will mention, definitely, it used to be in the past, I don't even know if this is true anymore, but people would say some people come to us more from a psychology perspective and some people come to us more from a media perspective, and then there are other options. But some people are highly tech savvy, they work in a tech field already, they're very technological, and other people are not, and they may not even be that swift. They can do all the stuff that's required to be a student at Fielding, but I've seen some very sweet actually interactions where one person's on their laptop and someone else is saying, oh, here's what you need to do, and I need that help sometimes too. I'm not afraid to admit I have a PhD in social psych, not technology, and I often need my teenager to tell me how to turn something off on my phone. So, don't feel bad about that if you're not the most tech savvy, but I try to counsel all my students, use your advantages, whatever they are. If you're very tech savvy, then that may play into your interests. It may play into what you can do. It may be an innovation in your research that you can do those things. But it's
I have my students do a skills and interest assessment at the beginning. I get thrown into random groups, and they actually have written back that they appreciated that. It's like, what do you already know? How can you help somebody else? And what do you want to know? If you're the one stuck doing Photoshop for every group project, maybe you want to be a video editor, you want to do something else. So the point is that they learn to help each other learn, continue. And I think
Exactly.
it's really a good model so far it's been working pretty well.
It is, and that's absolutely true that no matter what, we all have a profile of things for whatever reason where we know how to do, we're familiar with, and other things that we don't.
Yeah.
I'm good at SPSS, but I always call myself an Excel dummy. Like every time I touch a cell in Excel, the equation gets ruined, and I'm just angry. I don't even want to open an Excel document, but I will, of course, as much as I can. But some people can do beautiful things and visuals and colors and all kinds of stuff with Excel. So yeah, use your team's strengths. Well, I see we're coming up at the hour here.
Not leaving early.
If I could just add one thing, all the discussion about the tools for collaboration. I mean, this is clearly the best time in history to be able to collaborate. But the technology is one piece, but don't underestimate just the social and social support aspect of it. I started collaborating with others, not local to me as a graduate student before the internet. And, when we actually made phone calls and mailed stuff to people, and it was fun then, because, you get interested in these really kind of narrow, obscure topics, and you start to wonder, what's wrong with you that you're, and then you meet other people who share that interest, and it's very gratifying. And you go on this process of exploration, and you meet people and socialize in the process, and it just pays off. It's very gratifying process. Not unlike unique and weird hobbies when you meet somebody else who shares them. So the social aspect of research in a group setting, and you have a fantastic group that you're working with. It's just very rewarding.
It's true. My husband has a bunch of shirts like Doctor Who t-shirts or something, and random strangers will always come up to him and start talking to him about whatever he's wearing. But it is like that where you meet your people. I'm getting ready to go to a conference, and you go to a session where people are presenting on the things you're excited about, and you start getting into conversations, and you see other people's data, what they're doing, and that sparks an idea. So I think it's always good advice in this program to keep connected and keep those relationships up, keep sparking each other, and don't let yourself just be alone figuring something out, because you have people who will talk it out, and it won't seem like such a big deal once you've talked out whatever it is you're struggling to get by.